Hey, MotoAmerica fans. Welcome to Off Track, MotoAmerica's weekly podcast. I'm Paul Carruthers, the communications manager for MotoAmerica, and I'm joined, as always, by Sean Bice, who's in the beautiful state of Ohio. I'm out here in Southern California. Sean, how you doing today?
Doing great. I made that big trip back from up to Road America when I drove and got back here. It took me a little while to decompress from that weekend. I think it's just because we had so many things going on. I know, Paul, you and I and our team of social media people and PR, we were we were going crazy that entire weekend with posts, and there was a lot of stuff to talk about. So I needed a little more time to kind of rest from it. Did you feel that same way?
Yeah, I thought it was an awesome weekend.
Yeah.
We've talked about this before, but yeah, it was nice having the fans back. There was so many fans, and I think you brought it up the other day in a call. But it's like you can always tell if you're on a scooter or in a golf cart. If you're not making any, if you're not avoiding any people, it's not necessarily a good thing. And this was awesome because driving around in there and trying to get back and forth from the podium to the media center, there was tons of people in the tunnel. There was tons of people in the paddocks. You did have to avoid them while we don't want to run anybody over. So it was a really good sign. The weather was like spectacular. It was absolutely perfect, and the racing was great. So it's one of those weekends where you come home and you just feel really good about what we were able to accomplish and what we were able to do. And I think we made a lot of people happy by giving them a place to go watch some good stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I felt like the weight of the world had been lifted from everybody's shoulders that was there. It just felt like such a celebration. I mean, people being outside, being around, motorcycles and racing, and the good food that's up there, and obviously Mini Cup and all the other things are going on. Absolutely perfect weather the entire weekend, and yeah, I mean, it just was like one of these things where there was a confluence of so many great things that happened that people seemed to be in a particularly awesome mood, and so were we. So it was a memorable one for sure.
Yeah, there was so much going on. I thought the mini cup was really cool. I didn't, I got a peek of it at Pittsburgh, but it was kind of came when at a time. It was on at a time when we were pretty busy, so I didn't get the chance to actually go over there and watch some races, just some practice sessions. But with this one, we made it over there for the races, and it was a really good show. That track was like, I mean, it's like a beautiful little track. There's like elevation change, and they're in
Yeah.
the trees and everything. It was really cool, and it was nice to see so many families. They're all family based teams at that level, obviously, and they've all got these nice setups, and the bikes are all perfectly painted. And I don't know, it's really it would be impressive, especially for someone that had never seen it before. You're just like, wow, they really got their act together. So it was cool.
Yeah, those bikes and those riders are interesting too. You really never notice the scale of that bike until you get a full size adult on them or something, which obviously, as we know, talking to Brandon Creto a couple weeks ago, you can't full size adults for the most part can ride those things, but seeing the kids on them, I mean, without a proportion or a scale, they look like absolute full time, adult motorcycle road racers going around on those things. And like you said, that track is incredible. It goes up a little bit of a hill and down a little bit of a hill. It's not just a flat kart track. I mean, they really did a nice job with that facility. And I never really knew. I mean, I knew they had a kart track. I'd never been to it before at Road America, and it's like this whole other area, and it was almost like I don't want to say it's a secret that people don't know about, because obviously people did know, but you go into this area and it's like, wow, this is a whole other aspect of what our weekend was all about. And there were so many fans. We put a video up yesterday, which you probably saw the little section in it where all the riders are kind of congregated. All of our riders, all of our professional road racers were congregated together and watching these kids go around, which those kids had to be pretty psyched to look over and see, Tony Elias and, Sean Dillon Kelly and all those guys watching it. So I'm really glad that not only we're supporting it and promoting it, but it seems like our riders are embracing it too, because they know it's certainly the future of racing and in America for us. That's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. If you're one of those kids and those guys come and watch you race, I mean, it'd be like be like playing a little league game at a major league stadium when the major league players are there watching. You know, it's it's a pretty special deal for those kids, and I can't help but help what we're trying to do here, because as other kids are at home and they see that, or they're at the races and they see that, I mean, what's the first thing they're going to do is, hey, Dad, I want to do that.
Yeah.
So I think it plays perfectly into what we're trying to accomplish, and I think it'll get things sped up to what we want, so that we can start to be competitive with these other countries that have been doing this for a while longer. You know.
Yeah, and it's great because I mean, this when we started out the series, you know, MotoAmerica and had the KTM Cup, and then we have Junior Cup, which in and of itself is such a great thing for developing young riders. But to add this even before that, it just is a nice way to set it up for a transition, another rung on the ladder, so to speak. And I certainly we saw some real talent. You could just tell the talent that's involved in these younger people, and you know, we'll see them, I'm sure, pretty soon in Junior Cup and up through. So it's going to be fun to watch this all develop. And I know we've got 3 rounds for it this year, but I can imagine and foresee that it's probably going to be at more facilities in the future. Of course, it probably has to be at facilities that also have has a kart track. You couldn't really take a section of a racetrack and really turn it into something for Mini Cup, could you? I mean, you really have to have sort of a road course that was put in a copy machine and reduced a few percentages, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, and I think enough of our places have facilities like that, and plus, there's always other places we could go to. I think Brandon Cretu might have touched on it, but I could see it developing to the point where maybe there's like an East and a West series.
Yeah.
When there's more rounds, that way it wouldn't require a family from California to travel so far, or vice versa. Somebody from New Jersey. So I could see that developing into a nice little kind of an East-West regional thing and then, they meet at the end for a championship, kind of like what Supercross does. So,
yeah. You know, Yeah, it's funny. We talk about this at every race weekend, or at least we feel it. When our racing starts, even when things get going on Friday, but for sure on Saturday and Sunday when we start having the race 1 and race 2 in our classes, I am amazed at how quickly a day goes by, and also sometimes it's hard to even grasp what was going on in particular. Series, like there were compelling stories in Junior Cup. Every one of our classes had really cool things with lots of battling going on and interesting stories to talk about, and it goes by so quick for us on a Saturday and Sunday that you and I don't really have a chance to talk too much about it. We obviously at the end of the day write up the reports for the press releases and get everything out on it, and we watch all the races to know what's going on. But for you and I to actually discuss it, it's something we don't really get to do too much. But let's start by talking about some of the classes here. Let's talk about Junior Cup. It's interesting that you have a defending champion in Rocco Landers who came back in, and we thought, well, he was so dominant last year that he's just going to go nuts again this year with another year under his belt. And he's gotten taller this year. But boy, I'll tell you, Dominic Doyle, the South African, has really given Rocco everything he can handle in that class, and it's kind of gotten Rocco where he can't kind of figure out what's going on, or at least he's trying to figure out what he's not doing or what Dominic's doing. But it's a pretty good battle in that class, don't you think?
Yeah, I was honestly, when Rocco said that he was going to do the Junior Cup, I was like, oh no, because I was thinking, man, he's just going to smoke those guys, and it's not going to be that good of racing anymore. And I was wrong. I mean, it was like, and you should know better, but I should know better by this point, because it seems like no matter what, there's always somebody who steps up, and is willing or is ready to make that next advancement in their speed, etc. And Doyle obviously has done that. He gave him fits. I mean, he's won 3 of the 4 races, and it wasn't until the very last Junior Cup race at Road America 2 that Rocco managed to win. And even then, every single race was just a fraction of a second. I've never seen 4 races. I'm sure there's never probably been 4 races in at least in MotoAmerica history, but maybe even AMA road race history, that were so close with a combined margin of victory. So it wasn't like Rocco got smoked, and it wasn't like Dominic got smoked either. I mean, it was just like all four of those could have gone either way, and it was good to see. It was good to see Rocco finally win one because I could tell he was just getting a little bit down. But now we're headed to Road Atlanta, and I just expect more battles between those two for the entire season.
Yeah, definitely. And up through, down through the class, I mean, you've got Ben Glotty, who joined us halfway through last year. And, he's definitely a good rider from up in New England and has, was on the podium. And there are still great riders that advance and continue. There's some that have been in it for a little while now, but then there are some that were a little further back last year. They've come up through and some that have joined us. So it's just, there's always a story to be told. And I felt that way about Supersport too. I'm sure I know you and I talked about this. And I even kind of felt it among fans or some of the commentary on Facebook and social media that we see. I think a lot of people thought with Bobby Fong moving up from Supersport that, it was going to be a situation where what's the story to be told? Who's, Sean Dillon Kelly's going to dominate the whole thing. But it's the same thing with Junior Cup in Supersport. People step up, and this year it's just a complete battle again. And I looked at it over the weekend, and it reminded me of when, Garrett Gerloff, JD Beach, and Valentin DeBeese were battling it out. But yeah, we have three other protagonists that are at the front of the field, and again, it's compelling racing. So there's always somebody to step in and make it happen, I guess. And that's still as exciting a class to watch as it always has been.
Yeah, I don't think Richie Escalante's caught too many people by surprise, but I think the way that he went about his business in those four races might have been a bit surprising, because he really, if you look at the margins of victory, I mean, he pretty much dominated. Now, Sean Dillon Kelly had a crash, and I think that kind of dinged his confidence a little bit. But he came back and he was strong, and Brandon Posh was there as well. But I just think right now Escalante is going to be difficult to beat, because he's just full of confidence, and he's just got that way about him right now that he expects to be doing what he's doing. And I think once you get to that point where it's kind of a tipping point, when you get to that point, you're pretty difficult to beat. I think Sean Dillon Kelly's going to respond to that, and I think those guys will have battles. It's just going to be interesting to see who comes out on top, because those guys are going to fight. It's going to be good to watch, and I think Posh is also going to step up a little bit more. I think as we had him on the podcast last week, and he's obviously a bigger kid. So a place like Road America doesn't really suit his stature because of the drafting and all that stuff. So I think there's some steps to be made by him going forward, and I think we'll see that beginning at Road Atlanta.
Yeah, and with Richie, it's funny because he's shown a lot of talent for several years now, and we knew he was good. And this year he's on a bike that, it's funny now, I'm starting to see some commentary, I'm sure you have too, that people are trying to make a point now that that's a 636 cc's. Displacement's a little bit bigger, but that bike has been around, and James Morris, our technical director, has reminded me that bike's been around for several years, and people have done okay on it, but nobody's really been able to do all that on it, even at Daytona. When they have the 200, and you'd think there it would be pretty dominant, but it hasn't been the case. It's taken Richie Escalante to get on that bike, and I know it's a Graves bike, so we know it will be very, very well prepared, and is very well prepared, but I think it's a combination. I just think it's funny now that everybody's going like, oh, that bike shouldn't be in that class. And it's like, well, it's been there forever. Let's somebody's finally riding it and really, exploiting its potential, I guess. So let's calm down a little bit here, and it's not walking away either with anything,
it's ridiculous. I mean, you want to tell those people to piss off. It's like, I can tell you, anybody that runs at the front of that field is not only talented, but they have a good motorcycle under them, and they have a good crew. And the three guys we've just talked about have all of that. So it comes down to who's the best on that day. But I mean, it's like, can anybody let somebody just have some win some races and do his job and not have to hear about, some outside thing that's the reason for him doing that. The reason Richie Escalante is winning those races is right now Richie Escalante is better than those guys.
That's right.
And
Yes.
whether that stays the same or not, then we have to wait and see. But it's not because he's on the motorcycle he's on. He's got a good motorcycle and he's got a good crew. But like I just said a few seconds ago, it's like they anybody that runs at the top is in that same situation, or they wouldn't be there.
That's right. I have to mention, Paul, you and I witnessed a little interesting thing sort of before and after our press conference. It's interesting that I didn't know that Sean Dylan Kelly and Brandon Posh, I figured they knew each other, but they come from two totally different circles, sort of. And I didn't know that there would be a lot of, between them, let alone the fact that there's apparently some kind of huge rivalry. And there was a little bit of, I guess I'm going to say, trash talking going back and forth between the two of them. And you and I were kind of laughing about it and thinking we better pay attention to see what's going on here. So, but that being said, they raced so cleanly and closely together on the track. There weren't any incidents, despite the fact that we thought they were going to come to fisticuffs there in the press conference or before it or after it. So that's going to be one to watch.
Yeah, I think it's, anytime you have kids coming up through the system and they're of similar age, they're all, when you think about it, they're all trying to accomplish the same thing. And, if Posh wants to get somewhere, he's probably going to have to get there by showing that he's better than Sean Dylan Kelly or vice versa, because
Yep.
That's just the way it is. So, of course, there's going to be some kind of natural rivalry there. I don't know what their history is as far as when they were kids, if they raced against each other or whatever. I mean, and Brandon, he can trash talk with the best of them, and he's probably been doing that his entire life. So he's probably rubbed some people the wrong way. But I mean, I get a kick out of the kid because I just think he's funny, and I like the fact that he just says whatever he wants. And Sean Dylan Kelly's, he's not afraid to jab a little bit as well. So I think it's going to be fun to watch. I think our series having rivalries like that in any way, shape, or form is perfect, because you're going to have your fans that are for one guy and your fans that are for the other guy, and I just think it makes it more interesting. And I the more smack talk, the better. I'm hopeful that that all that continues, and who knows? It rarely gets to the point where it's an issue on track, but if it does, I mean, it does. But they're two smart kids, and they both ride extremely well, and everybody's safe at this point in time, so it's all good.
Yeah. So let's talk about Twins Cup a little bit. So that continues to be a class where every time we have our entry lists come out for the rounds, it tends to be the one that always has the most entries, and such was the case with Road America. Road America being such an iconic and cool track to watch, to ride on, let alone watch. Everybody seems to want to race on that one in every class, but Twins Cup has a lot of compelling stories too. You still got some of the sort of quote old guys who have been around a little bit, and they're still showing that they can do some things. Caleb DeCarroll, who's kind of been on this winning streak last year, every race he's entered, he's won, except that kind of came to a halt by Rocco Landers on Sunday, and that's another one that's interesting to watch, because there's a lot of passing back and forth, and it's not something where you're going to necessarily know who the winner is going to be. I continue to really enjoy watching that one.
Yeah, that's a good class too, because again, there's always someone that steps up that's kind of a surprise. Obviously, Rocco is not a surprise. We thought that he would instantly do well. I think he probably adapted to that bike maybe a little bit quicker than everybody thought, but you've also got to remember, he's in the off season, he rode thousands. So he's not, he got used to a lot more power. So it's not like that twin was just this huge jump from Junior Cup to the Twins Cup. He's had some experience on bigger bikes, this off season. But Caleb DeCarroll is, he'd won every single race that he'd been in until that last. So that race on Sunday when he was beaten by Rocco. But again, all of those races were extremely close. And like you said, I mean, we get to Road Atlanta, where I think you'll see some of those quote unquote old guys get back to the front, because a lot of those guys have a lot of laps at Road Atlanta. And they start to get back into, maybe it's a place where it's not a horsepower track. And that's not saying those other guys had more horsepower. I think all the bikes are fairly well balanced, but it just gives them a bit more comfort when they're at a place that they know really well.
Yeah, and we're mentioning when we're talking quite a bit about, well, when we say about the quote old guys, it's Chris Parrish, who won the championship a couple of years ago and is still hanging in there. He switched brands last year and is from a Suzuki and is racing a Yamaha now. And Jason Madama, the ever colorful Jason Madama, who races that number 213 Syndicate Yamaha too, happens to be both Yamaha bikes. Those guys were factors in both those races. In fact, Madama, I thought was going to get on the podium, again in that second race, but it's one of those things. He kind of got out of that group at the end there, and he kind of got shuffled back, and it can happen anywhere on that huge track that's Road America, but it just happened to happen for him getting close to the finish line, and he. His results were like, you can go from, podiuming, boy, that's a tough one to say, to to probably outside the top 10 or whatever. It doesn't take much when they're all grouped together like that. So that was a fun one. Let's talk about Stock 1000 a little bit. I want to mention a story that I thought was real cool that you and I both know about. And it's, Michael Gilbert, who raced with Team Norris last year, and now he's kind of going his own. And when we write these reports up about it, it's always interesting when we say Michael Gilbert Racing's Michael Gilbert, so it's a little too much Michael Gilbert in the course of a few words, but he's doing his own thing this year. And, he's been racing for a while, and he had a situation that with his engine. And I don't think we're telling any secrets to say that we saw a photo of, you showed me that you had, probably Mike, I'm sure Michael sent it to you, but the whole front of the crankcase on the lower half down by the crankshaft was there was a big chunk taken out of it. And I was like, well, that's catastrophic. What are you going to do in a case like that? And it was really cool that he went and talked to, it was Bradley Ward, and Bradley had an extra Kawasaki engine. I assume it had something to do with Aussie Dave, but maybe Bradley's got the engine himself. I need to track down that story and find out who it is. But regardless, ADR Racing and that Team Fly Racing did Michael a solid and, got him an engine and got him back in the show. And I guess that engine was pretty stout because he did okay. I mean, it's good to see that out of Michael.
Yeah, and it's, I think it's one of those things that probably happens more often than you realize, because I think everybody in that paddock, everybody knows what it's like to have a problem that could potentially knock them out of the race, and that's a long way to go to not get to race. So I think they all know it could be them. So I think it's one of those things where I think it probably happens more than you realize, that these guys do help each other out like that. And I mean, it shows the strength and character of our paddock, that, it'd be easy to say, oh, I can't help you, I don't have anything. But to give a guy a motor, and then, he's going to give it back to you when you get to Road Atlanta. I mean, that's a pretty cool thing to do for somebody. And I know Michael was very gracious and happy that he was able to do that. And he got to race. And like you said, he got on the podium. So yeah, it's little stories like that in our paddock that kind of, it's kind of a feel good thing. And it's nice to see that those guys cooperate and work with each other like that, especially when, sometimes they end up, they're racing against each other in certain cases. So yeah, it's very cool.
Yeah. And I mean, it was an interesting situation elsewhere in Stock 1002. I mean, we're not going to sugarcoat it. We'll certainly talk about it. PJ, after that first round, had gotten had some balancing done to his bike. They put some weight on his motorcycle, and it sure in the beginning didn't seem like it affected him too much. In fact, I mean, I heard all kinds of things around the paddock, things like, oh, the extra weight helped him because they were able to put it in a spot where it helped the handling of the bike. Other people were worried that, it was going to be such a detriment to that motorcycle, but he still was really doing well on that motorcycle. I didn't think it seemed to affect him too much, but then, lo and behold, he had a situation which, I'll let you talk about a little bit, Paul.
Yeah, thanks.
Well, if you want me to continue, I didn't mean to throw you under the bus.
No, it's okay. Apparently there was some issue with the gas cap. and he ended up getting soaked in the gas. It was fire. He jumped off the thing, and it spiraled downhill from there. The poor kid got some burns on him, which is the only thing here that really matters is the fact that he's going to be okay, because that's a scary situation. And no matter who believes what happened or what didn't happen, the bottom line is the most important thing in our sport is the people that do it. So in that situation, the only thing that worried me was that PJ's health or situation that he was in medically. And as it turned out, it was nice yesterday. He did an Instagram post where it showed him sitting there, and yeah, he's got some burns on his body, but he's going to be fine, and he's going to be back racing with us at Road Atlanta. The rest of it, I'm not going to get into. It's I don't know enough about the situation to comment on it. But I'll just go as far as saying that I'm happy that PJ's not as injured as badly as what that could have been, because anytime there's fire, it's not a good thing. So I feel badly for him that whatever happened, and we'll move on. It's just nice to see that they're going racing again. And as for the added weight, again, he's a good motorcycle rider. He's on a very good motorcycle, and he's surrounded by a very good team. So I didn't think the weight would have much of an impact on him, and as it turns out, I don't think that it actually did. I talked to my dad about it, and he basically said that he didn't think it would have much of an effect, and apparently I think they could put the weight wherever they wanted. If they used it to make the bike handle a little better or a little differently, then that's on them. I don't know if that's how that worked out. I'm not technically involved enough to know where the weight was or where the weight wasn't. But again, all that matters to me is that PJ's fine, and he's going to be back at Road Atlanta, and he'll be at the front of that race, and he'll also compete in the Superbike race as he's been doing, because again, he's a fast guy with a fast bike and a good team.
Yeah, and I know when we came down to the podium, and Sam Lockoff had gotten on the podium, who's with that team, Celtic HSBK, and Sam had actually said something about his thoughts are with PJ, and I had seen at one point there, I saw Barry Gilson, and the owner of Celtic Racing, and I was going to go over and talk to him a little bit about it. This was I guess it was on Sunday, and he was on the phone, so I'm sure he was on the phone a lot after that. And then, as you said, PJ put out a post that we reposted, and a big smile on his face, and you could see one of his hand and arm was bandaged a little bit. So I ended up calling Bobby Scheck about it, and he basically confirmed that PJ's doing great. He is for sure going to be racing at Road Atlanta in both in Stock 1000 and Superbike on that bike, and onward and upward with that. And he said he thought that when the situation happened, he had to bail off at about 150. So, which is a crazy situation in and of itself with the bike on fire. But it all came out good, and everything was fine there. And like you said, it was good to see that everything was fine. The bike can be repaired and whatever needs to be done. But PJ's smiling and happy, and I'm sure he's back to training and getting ready for this next round again. So. But Stock 1000 was another good one too. Even without him in it, it would have been nice to have him in it on Sunday and certainly see what he could do in Superbike. But onward and upward, I mean, the guys that were in the class, had an opportunity, and it's not just that bike; it's one less competitor who is a talented rider. So they were able to do some stuff, and they capitalized on it pretty good. But that series is interesting. I mean, you see there's certainly a lot of talent in there, and when they're also involved in the Superbike Cup, it's great for them to get all the track time and the seat time that they can. And I'm still have a little bit of trouble understanding how things work, but I think just the fact that they get to race in two series and mix it up with the big guys, so to speak, is good for them, because a lot of them are still pretty young. I mean, you think about Ashton Yates, he hasn't been on racing a motorcycle all that long, although most of his life, but he's still a pretty young kid. So it's fun to watch those kids on those big bikes do what they can do, though. It's good thing to see. So let's talk about Superbike. It was interesting again because a little bit of a situation there with Cameron is on another level. It seems like this year than last year. Even though he's on a new team, it seems like it's gelling real well for him. But you just never know what's going to happen. And he had a tip over, a low side. I heard they tried a different tire on the front, and it's debatable whether that was what caused it or it just happened to be one of those things. But somebody said something about, well, there's a crack in that turn, and I'm thinking, how many laps they go around in practice and qualifying? I'm sure he knows about that crack. I'm sure he knows to avoid it, but it had to be something with maybe something different with that front tire. But regardless, he had a low side. He was okay. And lo and behold, on that second race on Sunday, Bobby Fong, who's been in the spotlight a little bit for several reasons, not the least of which is he's now on a Superbike with one of the big teams in the paddock, had his day on Sunday and got his Superbike win, which, Paul, you had mentioned something that's pretty cool. Within the pretty long and storied history of AMA Superbike racing and now MotoAmerica AMA Superbike racing, there still aren't a huge number of guys that have won Superbike races. Some have won a lot of them. Some have won one or two, and Bobby is now one of those people that joins that group that have actually won a Superbike race, and it was good to see for him for sure.
Yeah, it was really good to see. He, after I saw him before the press conference when we were going from the podium to there, and he's like, oh, Cameron wasn't there, and blah blah blah. I'm like, nobody cares. You won a Superbike race, enjoy it for what it is, and not a great many of guys have actually done it. And when somebody looks back in freaking 10 years, no one's going to think, oh, he won that race because Cameron Beaubier was dominant but crashed in turn one. And it doesn't matter. You have to embrace that. And that's a big deal. Winning an AMA Superbike National is a big deal. There's a lot of guys that have never won one that were very good motorcycle racers. And there's very good motorcycle racers that have only won one of them. But you can hang your hat on it if you do win one. And Bobby needs to do that. And I saw him on Sunday night, and you could tell that he was, he'd embraced that a bit more and realized that he'd accomplished something without, with or without Cameron. And as for Cameron's crash, it's, that bump in turn one is like notorious. They know it's there. But you know what? People make mistakes, and you're probably talking about a couple of inches. Yeah. And he got it wrong and wasn't able to save it and crashed. And, he seemed fine after the race. It's like, yeah, okay. It happened. Let's move on. I also think he's probably more like that than he has been in previous years, because he also knows that, he's fairly dominant at this point. And he probably in his mind has no doubts that he's going to pick up right where he left off when we get to Road Atlanta and be just as dominant. If those guys are closer, then they're closer, but it's not going to be from him sliding down in any way. They're going to have to step up to get to him because he's not coming backwards.
Yeah. Well, so here we go. We're nearing the end of this podcast, but of course, let's talk about the situation with Matthew Skoltz and Tony Elias. It was interesting. We always see with Matthew, he's a pretty dramatic rider, the way he looks on the bike and how he tries so hard. And that team is very popular in the paddock, Westby Racing. And Matthew was second in one of the races at the first round, but he is the first one to admit that he struggles a little bit with Road America for whatever reason. I don't know if it's the bike or if it's him, but it seems like he just has these moments sometimes where, things happen, and it's debatable, but he went into that chicane, thought he saw a gap, went into that chicane and felt like he had room up the inside. And before he knew it, it tightened up pretty quickly. And it's interesting to see what is arguably probably the most muscular and biggest guy in Superbike against the one that's also muscular, but maybe not quite the size in terms of height, going up against each other. And they're really good friends. In fact, I had heard earlier in the day, Tony was actually down in that paddock talking to the team and, just having a good time with them. And then this whole thing happened. So, but Paul, talk about, I loved how you had noticed when Tony went sliding off the track, probably one of the easiest and most comfortable low sides you'd ever see. and he was pretty much back on his feet. But what he did for that moment, talk about that. It makes me laugh a little bit.
Well, let's start with like I feel for both of those guys.
Yeah.
Uh, Tony's had such a frustrating start to the season that he's probably at that point where you're like, what else could go wrong? I mean, basically he's had everything that could go wrong has gone wrong. He's had a mechanical problem. He's had a couple of crashes. He gets taken out by Matthew. But it was funny. Yeah, he popped up and he had his hands on his hips and he looked like a little soldier down there. And I was like, wow. And then he realized, oh shit, this thing's running and I'm going to need all the points I can get. So he got going again. But he's a colorful guy and he wears his emotions on his sleeve. And I think I Matthew probably could have had a bit more patience with what he was doing, but you also have to remember that Kyle Wyman had done really well the day before and finished third and was fast. And Kyle, I don't think Matthew would have stuffed it in there in that chicane where he did if Kyle Wyman wasn't there. But Kyle Wyman was starting to inch away a little bit, and I think Matthew thought, I gotta stick on this guy, or he's going to get away. And I think he made that pass. It was aggressive. It wasn't in an ideal spot, and bad things came out of it. But I think he would have had a little more patience and would have done that pass somewhere else if it wasn't for Kyle being in front of him and kind of getting away a little bit. I think he got impatient because he could see that bad things were going to happen if Kyle got clear and he lost that draft going up the front straightaway. Then he might have had a hard time, and that's a podium position that those guys are fighting for. So the on-track thing was one thing, and then Tony, being as frustrated as he is right now, he reacted to it, and I guess they got into it a little bit on the cool-down lap and also in Parc Fermé. And again, I look at it as these guys are doing everything they can to be the best in their profession, and sometimes this kind of stuff happens. And you know what? You can be a buddy. I could be friends with you right now, but if we get into it on the track, that can change in a heartbeat because there's a lot of emotion there. And again, it's their job, it's their profession. They're doing everything they can to get to the next level, and that involves beating your buddy. Sometimes this stuff happens, but as far as the series goes, hey, it's just another cool factor. Is if you're a Matthew Stoltz fan, then maybe you're pissed off at Tony Elias, and the opposite would be true if you're a Tony fan. So I think it just adds a little more interest to it, and we'll see if that rivalry continues. But I think it will. I don't think things like this, pass away easily. I think they tend to stick around, and if that guy has done something to you that you don't feel is right, then you look at him a little bit differently maybe in the next race. But they'll keep it cool and just have some good races out of it is what I believe will happen. But yeah, it's a nice little rivalry, and the series kind of needs those rivalries because it keeps people interested and keeps them watching.
Yeah, and it's of course two camps. You got two different sets of fans on it. One side says there was an opening there. Matthew started to take it. There's been some speculation whether Tony Elias leaned in a little bit or didn't want to, tried to shut the door a little too late. The other side of it is Matthew shouldn't have even tried to make that pass to begin with. But the bottom line about the whole thing is it was deemed by race control to be a racing incident. And it happens in the course of racing. Sometime there was nothing intentionally, bad that was done there. It's just like you said, racing. You get out on the track and things happen sometimes. But it was interesting, and it it's unfortunate. But Tony got back up and still finished. Didn't do too bad in terms of rejoining the race, even though he stood there for a split second or two with his hands on his hips, kind of posing for a minute. But it was it was.
I mean, this is motorcycle racing, and that stuff's going to happen. If you stand a motorcycle up by itself, it falls over. So, you know, these things happen, and they're racing hard, which is what you want to see. I mean, if they start pussyfooting around and I'll, you know, wave you by because you're a buddy and we had coffee this morning, that doesn't work. And
Right.
that's not you don't want to see that, because if you see that, you're not watching guys that are at the limit and that are pushing and pushing. And I mean, when I see something like that, yeah, again, I feel very bad for Tony based on the year that he's had. But,
Yeah.
you know, Tony will do the same thing to somebody. They all will. And if they don't, they're not racing near the front. I mean, I was very impressed, a big shout out to Kyle Wyman. And
Yeah.
I told him this to his face too. So it's not like I'm talking behind his back, although on a podcast, I guess you're not talking behind anybody's back. But I mean, I told him when he passed Tony on the brakes into that chicane in Saturday's race, I was like, wow, that's that kid making a statement that, like, you know what, I'm not just Kyle Wyman, the guy who owns his own team and races and, you know, finishes 5th or 6th and goes home happy. I'm a guy that's here that wants to fight with these top guys, that's working my ass off to get to that level. And I've built a team that's now competitive. I have a bike that's competitive, and I'm ready to freaking race it and risk having a crash or knocking somebody down to try to get to the next level, which is that podium, and do it consistently. So, you know, I was really proud of him, and making that pass on Tony showed. I mean, I in the media center, I'm like, okay, one thing he's not going to do is get by Tony on the brakes. The words hadn't hardly come out of my mouth, and he went ahead and did exactly that. So I thought that made a statement for him to all those other guys that, like, you know what, this guy is here and he will battle. And I don't think that's something that they necessarily thought about with Kyle in the past. And that's not a shot at Kyle. It's just not, he hasn't been that aggressive. You've also got to remember, this guy, it's easy to get aggressive when you're riding somebody else's shit and they're paying for it. It's harder to get aggressive when you throw that thing down the road and all you can see is dollar bills tumbling through a sand trap. That would take a little aggression out of you. But you know what? I think now that he's shown that, I think that's the Kyle Wyman we'll see going forward, and that's the Kyle Wyman that will continue to get good results. So,
yeah, I do too. And you know, I've said this before to you. I don't know if I may have said it on the podcast, but you know, it's like factory supported, privateer. It doesn't matter. I don't care. The whole, you know, we've got bikes on the track. We've got a lot of different brands. So it's interesting in terms of the dynamics of the motorcycle, you know, hearing that Ducati versus the Suzuki or the Yamaha. And it's just, there's some great riders in our series and they're putting on a great show. Again, all the classes were great, but, you know, obviously Superbike being the premier class. And, you know, what we saw was another great weekend of compelling racing. And it's still early on. You know, Cameron, we thought was going to kind of be, you know, be the guy. We even talked, can he win every race? Well, you always say that when somebody wins a few races in a row, but that's what's so great about our racing is you know, you never know. And it would be so hard to do that. And now that's not going to happen, but I'm just so excited to go on to Road Atlanta. And, you know, people said, okay, Road America, we did 2 rounds there. And we've joked saying we love the place so much we'd like to do even more rounds there. But the point is, it's got characteristics that suit certain motorcycles, certain riders. Road Atlanta is a whole different story, and the other tracks we go to are going to be a whole different story. So we don't know what's going to happen in any of the classes. But the cool thing about us getting to go to a different track now at the end of this month, actually, is, you know, everything resets again, and the great riders are still going to be the great riders in the classes, but there's a lot of different compelling stories to talk about. And, you know, I'm just really excited to see what happens next when we get down there, especially in Atlanta at the end of July. It's going to be the very definition of hot Atlanta, no doubt about it.
yeah, it's, you know, the thing with Road America, that was unprecedented, that you would actually go to the same place twice.
Yeah.
You know, back to back like we did. You know, we've done New Jersey twice, but we did it in the beginning and we did it in the end. So that, I mean, everybody in the paddock has some sort of issue somewhere at any given time. I mean,
Yep.
and Cameron's the perfect example of that. We thought Cameron was perfect. He was on another level. But you know what? You can make a mistake and everything changes in the blink of an eye. There was guys. guys that struggled in race one at Road America were probably dreading having a race two there because they probably knew the same problems that they couldn't fix would arise again. And I think that's actually the case. Some guys that had a very good Road America one probably carried that confidence and whatever setup they had right into Road America 2, and they're on their way again. So I think when we get to Road Atlanta, I'm not going to say everything's going to change because that's not the case, because the guys who are winning races now are going to continue to win races all year. But I think there's going to be some change and some mixing up a little bit as you look as the field goes down. And I think everybody's probably going to Road Atlanta thinking, okay, fresh start, new racetrack. Whatever happened to me at Road America, however bad I sucked at Road America, that was then, this is now, and let's go forward. So I think Road Atlanta is going to be exciting, and I think we'll start to, as the series goes on, things start to settle down a little bit. You can actually see who's got what. But I think right now it's a little too early to pass judgment on anybody.
Yeah. Well, I think we can wrap it up here. But Paul, one of the things I want to say is, we're closing in on getting close to 100 podcasts. It's a few away from that. We're in the 80s now, but you and I don't often just go it alone, the two of us. We usually have a guest on, and we have great guests and enjoy that, and we're going to continue to do that. But on these occasions when it's just you and I, especially following around like this, as I said in the beginning, you and I are so busy on the race weekend, we don't get to sit and talk about what we saw. And I really enjoyed you and I just kind of rapping about this whole thing. And, it's fun to just have the two of us because, we both have a lot of passion for racing and have been around it for a long time. So it's fun to be able to talk to just you about it.
Yeah, I enjoy it, and it gives my little espresso machine a workout because I double up on these days, so I have plenty to say.
So, well, anyway, fans, thank you so much for listening to our podcast. We get a lot of comments on these podcasts, and it's always great to hear from you guys out there about how we're doing, the guests that we have, or just us. And we want to thank you again for tuning in and listening to us. And we want to remind you to please subscribe to MotoAmerica Live Plus, our popular subscription streaming service. And it is popular. We get a lot of good comments about that too. And I think the coverage is really good on that. And race weekend tickets too. We proved we're 2 rounds into the season. We've had one with fans. We followed protocols that we needed to amid this situation with COVID-19. And we're going to continue onward and upward. We have been given to this point the go ahead to race at Road Atlanta and the rest of the series and rounds down the road. So we're going to be there, and we hope you will too. So please don't forget to get your race weekend tickets. And the way to subscribe and the way to get race weekend tickets is to go to MotoAmerica.com, our website, and you'll see links on there for complete details on how to buy tickets, how to subscribe, and even to listen to our podcast, which we put on there too. So thanks to everybody. Thank you, Paul.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. And if I was you, I would maybe, do you have a sauna nearby? You can get used to the heat because it's going to be a cooker down there. But one thing I like about the heat is I think it's another way of showing who's doing their work and who's not. Because if you're riding 15 miles on your bicycle, you might suffer. If you're riding 60 miles on your bicycle, you'll probably be okay. So it's always good to see. It's a place where hard work by our riders tends to pay off in that kind of heat. So it'll be fun when we get down there, and I look forward to seeing you. I look forward to seeing our fans again, and obviously all our teams and riders. So you take care of yourself, and we'll talk next week. And right now I'm working on it, but it looks like we'll have Bubba Schobert on our podcast next week, and he's a legend. He's a good dude, and it'll be fun to talk to him.
Looking forward to that. Okay, thanks, Paul. See you.
All right, take care.